Case 1. Bianca Devins and Brandon Clark, July 2019. Utica, New York. 17-year-old Bianca Devins had built a significant online presence doing what millions of teenagers do, sharing her life on Instagram. She posted cosplay photos, shared her thoughts on Discord servers, and connected with people across gaming and art communities. Her username @ESKYATAI had become recognizable in certain internet circles. She was creative, outgoing, and unapologetically herself online. That's where she met Brandon Clark, a 21-year-old who presented himself as a friend and potential romantic interest. They connected through Instagram and Discord, bonding over shared interests in music and internet culture. Their relationship existed primarily online, with occasional in-person meetups. To Bianca's followers, Brandon seemed like just another person in her social circle. But behind his messages, Brandon was developing an obsession. He monitored Bianca's every post, every comment, every interaction with other people online. When she posted photos with other guys, he'd interrogate her. When she talked to male followers, he'd spiral into jealous rage. Bianca tried to create distance, making it clear she wasn't interested in anything serious. But Brandon couldn't accept rejection, especially not public rejection, where all her followers could see that she'd moved on from him. On July 13, 2019, they attended a concert together in New York City. It was supposed to be a fun night out, something Bianca agreed to as friends. But when they got back to Utica in the early morning hours, Brandon drove them to a dead-end road. He'd been fixating all night on Bianca's interactions with other people at the concert, convinced she was trying to embarrass him publicly. What happened next shocked the entire internet. Brandon attacked Bianca in his car, pulling out a knife and slashing her throat. As she bled to death, he took photos of her dying body. But he didn't stop there. He posted those photos to Instagram, Discord, and various image boards, ensuring that the world would see what he'd done. The images went viral within minutes, spreading across platforms faster than moderators could remove them. Brandon then called 911, still at the scene, telling dispatch what he'd done. When police arrived, they found him lying on a tarp next to Bianca's body, having attempted suicide by cutting his own throat. He survived and was arrested immediately. But the damage was already done. Bianca's death photos had been viewed millions of times, reposted across Twitter, Reddit, 4chan, and Instagram. Her family spent months trying to scrub those images from the internet, filing takedown requests with every platform. But the photos kept resurfacing, shared by trolls who thought it was funny to traumatize Bianca's loved ones. Her mother, Kim Devins, Masta, became an advocate for stronger social media regulations around violent content, testifying before lawmakers about how platforms profit from viral violence. Brandon Clark pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. During sentencing, prosecutors revealed that he'd planned to make Bianca's death as public as possible, wanting internet fame even if it meant being famous for murder. He'd achieved his goal. Bianca Devins became one of the most well-known cases of social media violence, a cautionary tale about how online obsession can turn deadly. But Bianca's case revealed something even more disturbing. The algorithms that power social media actually amplified the violence. Her death photos were recommended to users, appearing in search results and suggested content. And platforms designed to connect people had become distribution networks for murder documentation. And Bianca's story was just the beginning of what social media stalking could enable. Case 2. Christina Grimmie and Kevin Loibl. While Bianca's murder showed how social media connections could turn deadly, some stalkers never even tried to make contact. They simply watched from a distance, building fantasies until obsession demanded action. Christina Grimmie knew what it was like to have thousands of strangers following her every move. She was counting on it. Christina had built her career on YouTube, posting covers of popular songs from her bedroom in New Jersey. Her voice was incredible, her personality infectious, and her channel grew exponentially. By 2014, she'd accumulated millions of subscribers and earned a spot on NBC's The Voice, where she finished in third place. She was 22 years old, talented, and on the verge of major stardom. Her social media presence was her lifeline to fans, and she maintained it constantly, posting updates, responding to comments, sharing her location during tours. Kevin Lovell had been watching for years. He lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, and had never met Christina, never spoken to her, never even commented on her videos. But he'd been obsessively following her YouTube channel and social media since she first started posting. He knew her tour schedule, studied her appearance in every video, and developed a parasocial relationship so intense that he genuinely believed they had a connection. In his mind, Christina was singing to him personally, and every video upload felt like a message meant specifically for Kevin. He began altering his own appearance to make himself more attractive to her, losing weight, whitening his teeth, getting LASIK eye surgery. He was preparing himself for the day they'd finally meet, convinced she'd recognize their destined connection. He had no understanding that she didn't even know he existed. On June 10, 2016, Christina performed at the Plaza Live in Orlando, Florida, just 2 hours from Kevin's home. She posted about the concert on Twitter and Instagram, excited to meet fans afterward. The venue was small and intimate, offering meet-and-greet opportunities after the show. Kevin saw this as his moment. He drove to Orlando, bought concert merchandise to blend in with other fans, and waited for the show to end. Christina finished her performance and began meeting fans in the venue lobby, exactly as advertised on social media. She was signing autographs, taking selfies, and chatting with the people who'd supported her career. She didn't notice Kevin approaching through the crowd. He looked like every other fan waiting for his turn. But when he reached the front of the line, he didn't ask for an autograph. He pulled out 2 handguns and opened fire, shooting Christina multiple times at point-blank range. Her brother Marcus, who'd been standing nearby, immediately tackled Kevin, trying to stop the attack. Kevin turned the gun on himself and committed suicide on the scene while witnesses screamed and scattered. Christina was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but the damage was too severe. She died a few hours later, surrounded by her family. The investigation into Kevin's background revealed the depth of his obsession. His computer was filled with Christina's videos, photos, and social media posts. Hundreds of screenshots cataloging her every move. He'd been planning this attack for months, tracking her tour schedule through social media, waiting for an opportunity when she'd be accessible. The meet and greet, advertised online to build fan engagement, had become his window to kill her. Christina's death sent shockwaves through YouTube and the broader entertainment industry. Other content creators began hiring security, limiting fan interactions, and questioning whether their social media transparency was putting them in danger. Her family established a foundation in her name, and advocating for venue security improvements and better threat assessment protocols for public figures. Christina Grimmie had done everything right. She'd built her platform authentically, engaged with her community genuinely, and pursued her dreams fearlessly. But she'd also made herself visible to a stranger who confused following her online with knowing her personally. And that confusion cost Christina her life, proving that sometimes the most dangerous stalkers are the ones who never say a word until they're standing right in front of you. Case 3. Molly McLaren and Joshua Stimpson. Across the Atlantic, another young woman was learning that breaking up with someone in the social media age came with dangers previous generations never faced. 23-year-old Molly McLaren from Kent, England, now was a university student who loved fitness, regularly posting gym selfies and workout updates to her Instagram. Her posts were typical for her generation: motivational quotes, progress photos, location tags at her local gym. She was proud of her transformation and wanted to inspire others. That's how Joshua Stimpson first noticed her. They'd matched on Tinder and dated casually for about 7 months before Molly realized Joshua was becoming controlling and possessive. He'd check her phone, interrogate her about male friends, and demand to know her location constantly. By early 2017, Molly had enough. She ended the relationship clearly and firmly, blocking him on social media and making it clear she wanted no further contact. But Joshua couldn't accept that Molly had moved on. Even though she'd blocked him on her personal accounts, he created fake profiles to continue monitoring her Instagram. He could see every gym selfie, every location tag, every post about her daily routine. He knew exactly where she'd be and when. And the more he watched her living her life without him, the angrier he became. Molly noticed him showing up at places she'd posted about. He'd appear at her gym, at restaurants she'd checked into, at locations she'd tagged in Instagram stories. She reported him to police multiple times, describing his stalking behavior and showing them evidence of his harassment. She even went to court and obtained a restraining order against him. But the legal system moved slowly, and Joshua's obsession was accelerating. On June 22, 2017, Molly posted an Instagram story showing she was heading to her regular gym in Chatham. It was a mundane post, on the kind of thing she shared regularly without thinking twice. But Joshua was watching. He drove to the gym's parking lot and waited for her workout to finish, stalking her through her own social media updates. When Molly walked out to her car, exhausted from her workout and completely unaware of the danger, Joshua was ready. He'd parked next to her vehicle and approached as she unlocked her door. Before Molly could react, he attacked her with a knife, stabbing her 75 times in a frenzied assault that witnesses described as absolutely relentless. He stabbed her in the neck, chest, arms, and torso, continuing even after she'd collapsed. Other gym-goers rushed to help, but by the time they reached her, Molly was already dead. Joshua fled the scene but was arrested shortly after. During the investigation, police discovered the extent of his social media stalking. His phone contained screenshots of Molly's Instagram posts, notes about her schedule, and evidence that he'd been using fake accounts to circumvent her blocks. He'd been planning this attack, using her own posts to track her movements and identify when she'd be most vulnerable. At trial, Joshua claimed he hadn't meant to kill her, that he'd only wanted to talk. But forensic evidence showed he'd brought the knife with him, waited in the parking lot specifically because he knew she'd be there, and stabbed her 75 times. The jury convicted him of murder in February 2018, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 26 years. Molly's mother became an advocate for stronger stalking laws and better police response to harassment reports. She pointed out that Molly had done everything right, reported the stalking, obtained a restraining order, blocked him on social media, but the system hadn't protected her. And Instagram's privacy settings hadn't prevented Joshua from creating fake accounts to continue his surveillance. Molly McLaren's case proved that even blocking a stalker isn't enough when they can create infinite fake profiles to keep watching. Her gym selfies, meant to inspire and motivate, had become a surveillance tool that led her killer directly to her. And she wouldn't be the only person whose routine, documented online, would prove fatal. Case 4. Karina Vetrano and Chanel Lewis. Sometimes the stalker isn't an ex-boyfriend or an obsessed fan. And sometimes it's a complete stranger who learns everything about you through social media without you ever knowing they exist. 30-year-old Karina Vetrano from Queens, New York, loved running. It was her stress relief, her meditation, her connection to her neighborhood. And like many fitness enthusiasts, her father Philip was proud of her dedication, frequently posting about her running routes and times on his Facebook page. Philip meant well. He was a proud father sharing his daughter's accomplishments with friends and family. He'd post things like, "Karina just ran 8 miles through Spring Creek Park, so proud of her dedication," along with photos of her favorite trails. He had no idea that these posts were creating a detailed map of his daughter's routine, visible to anyone who knew where to look. Karina ran the same route almost daily through Spring Creek Park, a somewhat isolated area in Howard Beach. She'd usually go in the early evening, between 5 and 6 p.m., when she finished work. The consistency gave her structure, but it also made her predictable. And someone was paying attention to that predictability. Chanel Lewis was a 20-year-old from Brooklyn, with a history of mental health issues and prior run-ins with police. He'd never met Karina, had no connection to her life. But he'd seen information about her running routine, whether through Philip's Facebook posts, through neighborhood observation, or through other social media breadcrumbs that revealed her patterns. He began visiting Spring Creek Park around the times Karina typically ran, watching the trails, learning the isolated areas where joggers ran alone. On August 2, 2016, Karina went for her usual run through Spring Creek Park. She texted her father before leaving, as she always did, telling him she'd be back in about an hour. But as daylight faded and an hour stretched to 2, then 3, Philip knew something was catastrophically wrong. Karina was responsible, cautious, and always kept her promises. He immediately drove to the park to search for her. Philip found his daughter's body in an isolated area off the trail, hidden in tall weeds. She'd been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled to death. Her hands showed defensive wounds. She'd fought desperately for her life. But in that isolated section of the park, at that time of evening, no one had heard her screams. The area was so secluded that her attacker had time to brutalize her without fear of interruption. But the investigation stalled for months. Police had DNA evidence from under Karina's fingernails. She'd scratched her attacker during the struggle, but it didn't match anyone in their databases. The case went cold until April 2017, when police finally connected the DNA to Chanel Lewis during an unrelated investigation. He was arrested and initially confessed, describing in detail how he'd waited in the park for a victim. At trial, prosecutors argued that Chanel had targeted Karina specifically because he knew her routine, though they couldn't definitively prove he'd seen Philip's Facebook posts. What they could prove was that Karina's predictable running schedule, documented and shared online, had made her an easy target. The jury convicted Chanel of murder in April 2019, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now, Philip Vetrano was consumed by guilt. He blamed himself for posting about Karina's running routes, wondering if his Facebook updates had helped her killer track her down. In interviews, he warned other parents about the dangers of oversharing their children's routines online, even with the best intentions. He became an advocate for social media safety, speaking at schools and community centers about the unintended consequences of seemingly innocent posts. Karina's murder revealed a terrifying truth. You don't even need to be active on social media to be stalked through it. Someone else's posts about you, your routine, your habits can paint a target on your back. And predators looking for vulnerable victims know exactly where to find that information. In our Case 5, Seath Jackson and Amber Wright. While some social media murders involve strangers gradually learning their victims' patterns, others involve people you know weaponizing the trust you've built online. 15-year-old Seath Jackson from Summerfield, Florida, thought he understood the rules of teenage breakups. You change your relationship status to single, unfollow your ex, maybe post some cryptic lyrics, and eventually move on. He'd done all of that after breaking up with his girlfriend, Amber Wright. What he didn't understand was that Amber had very different plans. Amber was also 15, but she'd already moved on to a new boyfriend, 18-year-old Michael Bargo, who had a violent criminal history and an intense jealousy toward anyone Amber had previously dated. Michael hated that Amber and Seath had mutual friends, that they still went to the same school, that Seath's existence was a reminder that he wasn't Amber's first love. He wanted Seath gone, and Amber was willing to help make that happen. The plan was simple. Amber would use Facebook to convince Seath that she wanted to reconcile and talk things through. She sent him friendly messages, apologizing for how things ended, suggesting they meet up to clear the air. Seath was hesitant. Their breakup had been messy, and he'd heard rumors that Amber's new boyfriend was dangerous. But Amber was persistent, sending message after message insisting that she wanted closure, that they could be friends, that everything would be fine. Finally, on April 17th, 2011, Seath agreed to meet Amber at a house where she was hanging out with friends. It was a Sunday evening, and he told his mother he'd be home by midnight. He had no reason to believe anything was wrong. Amber's Facebook messages had been warm and apologetic, suggesting this was just a chance to talk. He arrived at the house expecting an awkward but civil conversation. Instead, Seath walked into an ambush. Michael Bargo and 4 other teenagers were waiting for him. The moment Seath stepped inside, Michael attacked him, breaking his knees with a baseball bat before Seath even understood what was happening. Then the entire group joined in, beating Seath as he begged for mercy, crying and asking why they were doing this. Amber watched, the girl who'd lured him there with friendly Facebook messages, as her ex-boyfriend was tortured. But the attack didn't end with beating. After Seath lost consciousness, Michael shot him multiple times, ensuring he was dead. Then, in a detail so disturbing, it shocked even seasoned investigators, the group burned Seath's body in a fire pit behind the house and disposed of his remains in various locations, including a rock quarry. They treated his murder like a group bonding activity, taking turns participating in the disposal. Seath's mother reported him missing the next morning when he didn't come home. The investigation quickly focused on Amber and her friends. Seath's phone records showed her Facebook messages luring him to that house, and witnesses had seen him arrive there. When police searched the property, they found evidence of the fire and traces of Seath's blood throughout the house. All 5 teenagers were arrested within days. The evidence was overwhelming. Facebook messages, text logs, the physical evidence, and eventually confessions from several participants trying to reduce their sentences by testifying against others. Michael Bargo received the death penalty, becoming one of the youngest people on death row in Florida. Amber Wright received life in prison without parole. The other 3 participants received various sentences, ranging from life to several decades. During the trial, prosecutors showed the jury Amber's Facebook messages to Seath. Friendly, apologetic, promising just a conversation. The messages had been the bait that led a 15-year-old boy to his death. Seath had trusted those messages because they came from someone he knew, someone he'd once cared about. He never imagined that Facebook, the platform where he'd once publicly dated Amber, would become the tool she'd use to murder him. Seath Jackson's case proved that sometimes your most dangerous stalker isn't a stranger obsessing over your posts. It's someone you already know, someone who understands exactly what to say to lower your defenses. And in the age of social media, those manipulations happen through messages that seem friendly right up until you walk through the door. Case 6. Elliot Rodger and Isla Vista Massacre. Not every social media stalker targets a specific individual. Sometimes the radicalization happens in public, broadcast to thousands of subscribers, building toward violence that everyone can see coming, but no one stops. Elliot Rodger spent years documenting his descent into murderous hatred on YouTube, and the platform's algorithms helped amplify his message to other angry young men who felt the same way. Elliot was 22 years old, living in Isla Vista, California, near the UC Santa Barbara campus. He came from a privileged background. His father was a filmmaker who'd worked on major Hollywood productions. Elliot had money, education, and opportunities that most people only dream about. But he was consumed by one specific rage. Women wouldn't date him, and he believed that rejection justified violence. He began posting videos to YouTube in 2013, documenting what he called his involuntary celibacy. His early videos were awkward, showing him sitting in his BMW, complaining about seeing couples together while he remained alone. He'd film himself at parks and beaches, narrating his bitterness toward the people around him who were living the life he thought he deserved. The comment section filled with other young men who shared his anger, creating an echo chamber that validated and intensified his worldview. As months progressed, Elliot's videos became darker. He began explicitly threatening violence, talking about making women pay for rejecting him, describing his fantasy of becoming a god who would punish society for his loneliness. He posted video after video, each more disturbing than the last, building an audience of similarly radicalized men who encouraged his violent rhetoric. YouTube's algorithm recommended his videos to users watching similar content, spreading his message further. On May 23, 2014, Elliot uploaded his final video, a 6-minute manifesto titled Elliot Rodger's Retribution. Sitting in his car, he calmly explained his plan to massacre the women who'd rejected him and the men who'd succeeded where he'd failed. He promised that his retribution would be horrifying, that he'd make everyone see what they'd driven him to do. He ended the video with a smile, saying he couldn't wait for the day of retribution to arrive. That day was already here. That same evening, Elliot emailed a 137-page written manifesto to his parents, therapist, and several others, detailing his ideology and planned attack. His mother saw the email, watched the YouTube video, and immediately called police, terrified her son was about to do something horrific. But by the time authorities began responding, Elliot was already executing his plan. He started by going to his apartment, one where he stabbed his 2 roommates and their friend to death. 3 men who'd never wronged him, but happened to be home when he began his rampage. Then he drove to a UC Santa Barbara sorority house, planning to break in and murder the women inside. When he couldn't get in, he shot 3 women standing outside, killing 2 of them, Catherine Cooper and Veronica Weiss, both 19 years old. Neither had ever met Elliot or rejected him. They were simply women, which was enough. Elliot then drove through Isla Vista, shooting randomly at people and hitting pedestrians with his car. He killed 1 more person, Christopher Martinez, also 19, shot while buying a sandwich at a deli. After a shootout with police, Elliot crashed his car and shot himself in the head, ending his rampage with 6 people murdered and 14 others injured. The aftermath revealed that Elliot had been broadcasting his intentions for over a year. His YouTube channel was a roadmap to mass murder, viewed by thousands of people who'd done nothing to intervene. Some commenters had actively encouraged him, treating his violent rhetoric as entertainment. The platform had allowed his content to remain online, even as it became increasingly explicit about his plans to kill. Elliot Rodger became a martyr to the incel movement. an online subculture of men who blame women for their own isolation. His videos continue to be re-uploaded and celebrated by others who share his ideology. Subsequent mass shooters have cited him as inspiration, proving that social media radicalization doesn't end when the original killer dies. It spreads through platforms that prioritize engagement over safety. Elliot's case forced a national conversation about YouTube's responsibility for radicalizing content. But years later, similar videos still proliferate across social media, building audiences of angry young men who might be planning the next massacre. Case 7. Allison Parker and Adam Ward and Vester Flanagan. If Elliot Rodger showed how YouTube could radicalize killers, the murder of Allison Parker and Adam Ward demonstrated that social media had become something even more disturbing, a live broadcast platform for murder itself. On August 26, 2015, social media users woke up to videos of an actual execution posted by the killer himself, showing a murder from the shooter's perspective. Allison Parker was a 24-year-old reporter for WDBJ-TV in Roanoke, Virginia. She'd grown up in the area. She's worked her way through journalism school and landed her dream job at a local news station. Adam Ward was her 27-year-old cameraman, engaged to be married, respected by everyone at the station. That morning, they were doing a routine live segment at Smith Mountain Lake, interviewing a local business owner about tourism. What they didn't know was that their former colleague was watching the broadcast and planning to kill them on camera. Vester Flanagan had worked at WDBJ as a reporter, but was fired in 2013 after multiple conflicts with staff and angry outbursts. He'd blamed everyone but himself for the termination, convinced that Allison and others had conspired against him. He'd filed complaints alleging discrimination, but his claims were found to be baseless. Still, he nursed his grievance for 2 years, until following his former co-workers on social media, watching their broadcasts, and planning revenge. Vester knew Allison's schedule because WDBJ posted their reporters' locations for public events. That morning's live segment was advertised on the station's website and social media pages, announcing exactly where Allison and Adam would be and when. Vester drove to Smith Mountain Lake, brought a Glock 9mm handgun, and waited for his moment. At 6:45 a.m., as Allison conducted her interview live on air, Vester approached from behind the camera. He stood just feet away, gun raised, waiting. The station was broadcasting live. Thousands of viewers were watching their morning news, drinking coffee, getting ready for work. Allison and Adam had no idea he was there. Vester waited until they were fully focused on the interview, then opened fire. He shot Allison and Adam multiple times at point-blank range while the cameras were rolling. Viewers at home watched in horror as the broadcast suddenly showed gunfire and screaming before cutting away. The woman being interviewed, Vicky Gardner, was also shot and critically wounded. Vester fled the scene while his victims lay dying on the dock. But what happened next was unprecedented in the history of crime and social media. As Vester drove away from the murder scene, he uploaded a video to Twitter and Facebook. First-person footage he'd recorded on his phone while shooting Allison and Adam. The video showed his perspective as he approached with the gun, aimed at Allison, and fired. He included a caption explaining why he'd done it, ranting about perceived slights and discrimination. The video went viral instantly. Within minutes, it had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, shared across platforms faster than moderators could delete it. People were watching a murder from the killer's perspective, posted by the killer himself, while he was still actively fleeing police. It was a horrifying milestone in social media's relationship with violence. Vester continued posting to social media as police closed in on him. He tweeted more justifications, tagged news organizations, tried to control the narrative around his crimes. Finally, as Virginia State Police attempted to pull him over on Interstate 66, Vester shot himself. He died at the hospital a few hours later. The broadcast murders of Allison Parker and Adam Ward changed how news stations handle security and live broadcasts. But more significantly, they forced social media platforms to confront their role in distributing violence. Facebook and Twitter were slow to remove Vester's videos, prioritizing engagement metrics over ethical considerations. By the time they acted, millions had already watched Allison and Adam die from their killer's perspective. Allison's father, Andy Parker, became an advocate for gun control and better social media content moderation. He spent years fighting to keep his daughter's murder video from being re-uploaded, filing thousands of takedown requests. But the video still surfaces periodically, shared by people who treat real murder as entertainment content. Allison and Adam's deaths proved that social media had evolved beyond connecting people. It had become infrastructure for broadcasting violence in real time. Case 8, Nicole Lovell and David Eisenhower. While some cases involve public violence broadcast to millions, others begin in the hidden corners of the internet where predators groom children away from their parents' watchful eyes. 13-year-old Nicole Lovell from Blacksburg, Virginia, spent a lot of time online. She'd survived a liver transplant as a child, struggled with her health, and found the internet to be a place where she could be herself without judgment. She used Kik, a messaging app popular with teenagers, to talk to friends and meet new people. Nicole's mother knew she was on social media, but didn't monitor every conversation. Nicole was careful about her privacy, and her mother trusted her to be safe online. What her mother didn't know was that Nicole had been talking to David Eisenhower, and an 18-year-old freshman at Virginia Tech who'd found her through mutual online connections. David presented himself as a friendly college student who understood what it was like to feel different. For weeks, David and Nicole messaged back and forth on Kik. He was patient, attentive, and made Nicole feel special in ways that teenage boys her age didn't. He asked about her interests, complimented her, and slowly built trust. Nicole began to develop feelings for him, excited that an older college guy was paying attention to her. She had no idea that David was carefully grooming her, using tactics that predators have perfected through years of online hunting. David wasn't acting alone. He'd confided in his friend Natalie Keepers, also a Virginia Tech freshman, about his plan to kill Nicole. Natalie had helped him research how to dispose of a body, where to buy supplies, and how to avoid getting caught. The two of them treated Nicole's planned murder like a school project, messaging each other about logistics while simultaneously maintaining friendly conversations with Nicole on Kik. On January the 27th, 2016, David convinced Nicole to sneak out of her house late at night to meet him. He told her he was taking her on an adventure, that they'd finally spend time together in person. Nicole climbed out of her bedroom window at midnight, trusting the person she'd been messaging for weeks. She walked to the parking lot where David was waiting, excited about what she thought would be a romantic evening. David drove Nicole to a remote area in North Carolina, about an hour from Blacksburg. There, with Natalie's help, he stabbed Nicole to death and disposed of her body in the woods. They covered her remains with branches and debris, then drove back to campus as if nothing had happened. The next morning, Nicole's mother discovered her missing and immediately called police, finding her bedroom window open and her daughter gone. The investigation moved quickly. Police traced Nicole's Kik messages to David Eisenhower and discovered the disturbing conversations between David and Natalie about planning a murder. When confronted, Natalie eventually led police to Nicole's body. The evidence was overwhelming. Kick messages showing David luring Nicole out of her house, text conversations between David and Natalie discussing the murder, and physical evidence placing them at the crime scene. During the trial, prosecutors revealed that David had killed Nicole because he feared she'd tell people they'd had a sexual relationship, which would result in serious legal consequences for him. Nicole's Kick messages showed she'd been planning to share her excitement about dating a college student, a revelation that would have destroyed David's life. So he decided to destroy hers instead. David Eisenhower was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Natalie Keepers received 30 years for her role in planning and covering up the crime. But for Nicole's family, no sentence could address the fundamental question: how had a predator been able to groom their daughter through a messaging app without any intervention or warning? Nicole's case sparked conversations about Kick's lack of parental controls and the app's popularity among predators specifically because it didn't require phone numbers or real identities. The platform made it easy for adults to create profiles, find vulnerable children, and groom them without parents ever knowing conversations were happening. Nicole Lovell had been stolen through pixels and messages, lured out of her bedroom by someone who'd spent weeks earning her trust through a screen. Case 9. Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your digital life isn't a stranger. It's someone you dated, someone who knows your passwords, someone who's been granted access to your private world and refuses to leave it. Travis Alexander met Jodi Arias at a work conference in 2006, and within weeks, they'd connected on MySpace, exchanged numbers, and begun a relationship that would eventually become one of the most publicized murder trials in American history. Travis was a 30-year-old motivational speaker and salesman living in Mesa, Arizona. He was active in his church, well-liked in his community, and building a successful career. Jodi was 27, recently moved to Arizona to be closer to Travis, and quickly becoming obsessed with every aspect of his life. She converted to his religion, joined his social circles, and inserted herself into his daily routine with an intensity that Travis initially found flattering. But as their relationship progressed, Travis realized that Jodi's attention had crossed from devotion into something disturbing. She'd hacked his Facebook and email accounts, reading his private messages. She'd show up unannounced at his house, sometimes climbing through dog doors when he wouldn't answer. She'd follow him on dates with other women, tracking him through social media check-ins and friend posts. When Travis tried to end the relationship officially, Jodi refused to accept it, insisting they were meant to be together. Their relationship became a toxic cycle. Travis would try to create distance, Jodi would show up anyway, and they'd fall back into physical intimacy that Travis later regretted. He confided in friends that he was afraid of Jodi, that she was stalking him, that he couldn't get her out of his life. His text messages showed him telling Jodi she was a sociopath, that she was evil, that he wanted nothing to do with her. But she had keys to his house, knew his schedule, and monitored his every social media post. On June 4th, 2008, Jodi drove from California to Travis's house in Mesa, a trip she initially denied making. She'd borrowed a rental car and brought a gun, telling friends she was going somewhere completely different. When she arrived at Travis's house that evening, she convinced him to let her in. They had sex, which Travis allowed to be photographed on his camera. Those photos would become crucial evidence, time-stamped proof that Jodi was there. What happened next? Jodi would later describe in 3 different versions, each contradicting the last. The evidence, however, told a clear story. At some point after their sexual encounter, Jodi attacked Travis in his shower. She stabbed him 27 times, slashing his throat so deeply he was nearly decapitated, and shot him in the head. And the attack was so frenzied and brutal that blood covered the bathroom, hallway, and bedroom. Travis had fought desperately, his defensive wounds showing he'd tried to escape. Jodi then spent hours staging the scene, washing blood off herself, running the washing machine to clean evidence, and deleting photos from Travis's camera. She didn't realize the camera's deleted files could be recovered, preserving images of the attack itself, accidental photos taken as the camera fell during the struggle, showing Travis bleeding in the shower and Jodi's legs as she dragged his body. Travis's friends found him decomposing in his shower 5 days later when he missed a business trip. The investigation immediately focused on Jodi. Friends described her stalking behavior, her obsession, her refusal to accept their breakup. When police contacted her, Jodi claimed she hadn't seen Travis in months and had no idea what happened. But the recovered camera photos proved she was lying. The trial became a media sensation, broadcast live for months as Jodi's story changed from "I wasn't there" to "intruders killed him" to finally "I killed him in self-defense." The jury didn't believe any version. They convicted her of first-degree murder in 2013, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jodi Arias' case predated modern social media stalking tools, but she pioneered many of the tactics that digital stalkers now use. Hacking accounts, monitoring posts, using check-ins to track location, refusing to respect online boundaries. She proved that giving someone access to your digital life creates vulnerabilities that are almost impossible to fully revoke. And by the time Travis realized how dangerous that access was, it was already too late. Case 10. Philip Markoff, the Craigslist killer. We'll end with a case that proved social media stalking wasn't limited to Facebook or Instagram. Any platform connecting people online could become a hunting ground. Philip Markoff didn't spend months grooming his victims or building obsessive relationships. Instead, he used Craigslist's anonymity to find vulnerable women, attack them, and disappear back into normal life. Until one woman fought back hard enough to leave evidence that would finally identify the man media dubbed the Craigslist killer. In April 2009, Philip was a 23-year-old second-year medical student at Boston University. He was engaged to be married, studying for exams, and living what appeared to be a completely normal life. His fiancée, Megan McAllister, believed she was marrying a future doctor with a bright future. She had no idea that Philip was trolling Craigslist's erotic services section late at night, identifying sex workers and massage therapists he could rob and assault. Philip's method was calculated and cold. He'd respond to ads posted by women offering massage or escort services, using anonymous email addresses and burner phones that couldn't be traced back to him. He'd book appointments at hotels, specifically choosing locations with limited security cameras and easy escape routes. When the women arrived, Philip would attack them, robbing them at gunpoint, binding them with zip ties, and in some cases sexually assaulting them before fleeing with their money and belongings. His first confirmed victim was Tricia Leffler, a Las Vegas woman who advertised massage services. In December 2007, Philip attacked her in a hotel room, robbing her at gunpoint and stealing her cash. Tricia reported the attack to police, but didn't have any useful identifying information. She'd only known him by the fake name he'd used online. Philip got away clean. On April 10, 2009, Philip responded to an ad posted by Julissa Brisman, a 25-year-old masseuse who was in Boston visiting friends. She advertised her services on Craigslist, and Philip booked an appointment at the Copley Marriott Hotel. When Julissa arrived at the room, Philip was waiting. He tried to rob her at gunpoint, but Julissa fought back harder than his previous victims. She struggled, screamed, and refused to submit quietly. In the ensuing struggle, Philip shot Julissa 3 times, killing her in the hotel hallway. He fled the building while hotel guests called 911, leaving Julissa bleeding to death on the carpet. But this time, he'd made mistakes. Security cameras had captured him entering and leaving the hotel. Julissa had fought hard enough that Philip's DNA was under her fingernails. And most importantly, police could trace the email communications between Philip and Julissa back through Craigslist. 4 days after Julissa's murder, Philip attacked another woman he'd contacted through Craigslist, Cynthia Melton, an exotic dancer. But this attack was interrupted when hotel staff heard the commotion. Philip fled again, but now police had multiple crime scenes, multiple victims, and security footage showing the same tall, blonde man in similar clothing at each attack. On April 20th, 2009, Boston police arrested Philip Markoff as he and his fiancée drove to Foxwoods Casino for what was supposed to be a pre-wedding celebration. Megan was completely shocked. Her gentle, studious fiancé was a serial predator who'd been attacking women he found on Craigslist. The evidence was overwhelming. His computer showed the Craigslist communications, his apartment contained zip ties and duct tape matching what he'd used in attacks, and his DNA matched evidence from multiple crime scenes. Philip never went to trial. On August 15, 2010, while awaiting prosecution, he committed suicide in his jail cell. He left a suicide note to Megan, but she never publicly revealed its contents. He'd carved his ex-fiancée's name into his arm before dying, a final disturbing gesture that revealed his narcissism even in death. The Craigslist killer case sparked nationwide concern about the platform's safety, particularly its personal services sections. Craigslist eventually shut down its erotic services category, though similar ads migrated to other sections. But the case proved that any platform connecting strangers online could be weaponized by predators who understood how to exploit anonymity and trust.